So it's MOT time for the Clio, and after a little inspection around the car, I've found that we've got a dodgy shock absorber. Looking underneath, we can see the one on the passenger side is nice and dry. There's no problems with it, there's no leaks or drips or anything. Looking on the driver's side, we can see this one looks a whole lot worse. It looks wet, it's leaky, it's oily, and we can see that there's residue all over it. So this is the one we're going to be changing. So first thing I'm going to do is just get the wheel nuts loosened off on the back here. Next up, we just need to loosen off the top mount. So that's just behind this bit of carpet here. So I'm just going to pull that forward and we can have a look at that. Okay, so looking in here, we can see the top mount. What we've got is the nut, which is a 16mm. I don't know if you can see on just the top mount there, you've just kind of got these squared off edges or flattened off edges. I've managed to find it. It's just about a 6mm traditional spanner, just fits on there and holds it nicely. So what I've got is just a 16mm ratchet spanner, which is just going to go over the top of that, just so that I can use that obviously to loosen it off. And I'm going to hold that still just with a 6mm, just so that we can keep it in place. Just while I loosen this top mount off, what I'm going to do is not take it all the way off. I'm just going to leave the nut fixed on so it's holding the top mount just in place for the time being. You can see what I'm doing is just using the car to help itself. So the little spanner that I've got on there, just holding that still, what it's doing, just where it's rotating, it's just pushing against the side of the inside, the kind of the mould in there. So it's not the outside, so we're not going to get a mark on the outside of the car or anything, but that's just holding it still just nicely while we loosen off this mount. Ratchet spanners like this are worth their weight in gold when it comes to this sort of activity. We can see now that's nice and loose, but like I say, I'm not going to take it all the way off. I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just jack the car up. So I'm going to get all the chocks in place, we'll put the axle stands on, just to make sure that we're working as safe as possible. Just a little tip that I find, sometimes if you're jacking up the car at the back, obviously you want to get the axle stand in, maybe at the back as well, as we do today. If your trolley jack doesn't actually fit because it's too tall to fit underneath between obviously the floor and the bottom of the car, if you just jack it up at the back first, just so it lifts it up in the air, obviously when it comes down it's going to be under tension because the wheels will come in slightly, and that'll probably just leave the car up slightly enough just so that you can get your trolley jack in there, just as I've been able to do. And now obviously I can get the axle stands in here, let the car down, and the back wheel's nicely off the floor, exactly as we need. Okay, so next up we're going to take the wheel off, and because we're now playing with dirty stuff, I've got the gloves on. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is basically removing the bolt from here, or further down here as we can see. We'll see more in a minute. What that means it's going to do is kind of this rear axle is going to drop down a little bit. So just to make sure that we're not putting any undue pressure just on the brake lines, what I'm going to do is just pull this out of the bracket, just pull it forward. There we go, just like that. We can make sure that we put that back on when we're done. Okay, so now back under the car, we can see the bolt that we're talking about. We've just got this one here. So what we're going to do first is just get a bit of WD-40 on there, and just inside as well. And obviously just give it a little brush over, just with the wire brush, just so we can get any dirt and debris off of it before we start removing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is spray a bit of WD-40 on here, but obviously what we can see is I've put the tyre there, or the wheel, just as a little safety precaution, so if the car should fall off the stand, obviously there's something there. And while I'm just working at the back of the car, I'm not going to get squashed. But what I need to be careful of is that while I'm spraying WD-40, I'm not about to get it all over that. So I'm just going to make sure, one, I can either move the wheel out of the way, which might be easier, or what I'll do is just change the angle that I'm going to spray at and just come round from the side, so I'm not spraying towards the wheel. Okay, what I'm also going to do, just to release a little bit of pressure just from the shock, just to make sure that we're kind of not under too much pressure here, I'm just going to raise the arm slightly, just using the jack, which is obviously why I needed to remove it from the car and we put the axle stand in. as you can just about see over there. There we go. So I'm just going to take the pressure of the arm just with that. A little bit more. There we go. So now while we put the bolt under stress, what we shouldn't be doing is stressing any other parts, because the jack's got basically the weight of everything, and while we're going to try and break this sill, it's been on here a good few years, we shouldn't be stressing any other components. So I've got an 18mm socket just on the end here, and I've just got an 18-inch breaker bar as well, so hopefully this will start to move nicely. There we go, it's moving already. It should. There we go, it's coming away nicely now. So what I'm going to try and do now is just get it on the gun. We should be able to remove it. Mostly what I don't want to do is take it all the way up. So what I'm going to look at just while from behind the camera is just how far it's coming out here. So I'm not going to remove the whole bolt the whole way out. So okay, so there we go. So if we just bring the camera around, we can see now that the bolt's most of the way up, but it's not all the way, so it's just there, it's just holding it in place still. Okay, so now back up here inside the boot, what we should be able to do is finish removing this 16mm top mount nut. There we go, just nice and easy. We don't need the spanner because we left it nice and loose. That comes away. And then our top mount might need a little bit of persuasion. It's been on there for a while. No, in actual fact it's okay. We'll just have a quick look at that. It looks fine. Doesn't look like there's any splits in it or anything like that, so that's all good. So now what we've got, you can see it's just nice and loose in the hole down. So let's get back down below. Now back under the car, what we should be able to do is just finish removing this bolt here, so the whole shock can then come away. There we go, that's off nice and easily. Got our bolt, and then the whole shock just come away nice and easily, and there we go. Okay, so with the shock now off, obviously we can see the top mount. Just have a quick look at that. We can see, again, it's not in too bad condition. It looks all right, there's no splits or cracks or anything like that. But depending on the new shock that you get, it may or may not come with new top mounts, exactly as this one does. So this is what we're going to be using, the new ones. So even if these old ones had perished, it wouldn't matter because we've got a nice new ones here. Okay, so with the new shock, obviously it comes with this kind of packaging tape just running around it, just so it kind of keeps it compressed, and obviously means that there's less packaging because it means a smaller box, so it's all good for the environment. So what I'm going to do is just look at it against the old one, just for a second. If I've moved the camera, we can see obviously the bottom mount looks to be good. Top mount, obviously not exposed it yet. Obviously it looks longer, like I say, because it's compressed at the minute. So what I'm going to do is just compress it further. I've just got the box on the floor here that you can see. You can see the brand that it is. I'm just going to kind of stand above it, push it down. There we go, and just remove that packaging tape. Okay, so now we've got the new shock out. Before we put it on the car, what I'm going to do is just compress it a couple of times, just to make sure that everything's coated inside. There's no issues. It's pressing back up fine, exactly as we can see there. So just once, just twice, a couple of times, just to compress it down. Okay, so while the shock's off, and while we can see the fixing point, what I'm going to do, if I can see past the camera, is just get my wire brush in here and just give this whole area a good clean up, just so we've got a nice clean surface, nice clean mounting face for the new shock to fix to. Okay, so what I'm going to do now with the new shock is just remove this top mount element. You can see there, just taking off the nut, taking off the spacer, and then what we've got is kind of this two section piece, so we just put that down gently there, which will go up and through. So you can see there's two rubbers. Obviously what the purpose of that being is to clamp between the car. So this bit's going to go up through the mount inside the wheel arch here, and then this one will go over on the top. So I'm just going to get the shock again, just down here. That's going to go back over the top, and then what we're going to do is insert this end back up through the wheel arch. Okay, so up it comes, straight through, nice and in there. Now let's go back down the bottom. Okay, so now down here, obviously what we need to do is just get our fixing straight back through into here. If it's slightly lower, you should just be able to push it up with your hand, straight in, have a look through, line it up. Obviously make sure you're not crash threading it. Start it off by hand, as always. Get it in there. There we go, and that's starting to go in. I'm going to use the gun just to get it in most of the way, but obviously not tightening up, not torquing it up just yet. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now that's in, and obviously the top end's in, I'm just going to jack this arm a little bit more, just as though the wheel's going to be under pressure, like it was on the floor, and then we should be able to torque it up. So, just lifting it up. There we go, so it's under pressure. Now what we can do is just get a torque wrench on now. And we're going to torque this up to 85 Newton meters. Perfect. Okay, so now back up here, what we've got obviously is our top mount just poking through. So we've got our rubber, which is going to go on. And you can see the rubber has kind of got this lip, which is just going to sit in the recess. So there's a slight recess just all the way around that collar. So just make sure that you're nice and centered. That sits on there. Then our top mount fixing. Then our bolt on the top. It might be a slightly different size to the one that was on there, but now we've got that on there. I'm just going to tighten it up, kind of finger tight. I'm just going to get a spanner on there, just give it a good nip up, and then we should move on to the next bit. Okay, so with the top mount now kind of fairly tightish, what we're going to do is just drop this arm down, because it's held in place at the top. We don't need it there anymore. So I'm just going to lower the trolley jack, just let that come down nice and easy. There we go. Move that way. Now we can get the wheel back on. And then of course don't forget to torque the wheel nuts. So we're going to do these at 120 Newton meters. Okay, then back up here, this top mount we need to tighten up to 47 Newton meters. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, shall we say. I've not got a small enough spanner just to grab the top of this. So what I'm actually going to do is just try a pair of pliers to start with. If not, I'll get a pair of mole grips on there or something like that, and then just tighten this up. Yeah, 47 Newton meters. Okay, brilliant. So with that now tightened up, nicely torqued up to 47, what we can do now is just get this carpet back in. I'm sure it's going to be easier said than done to make sure it goes back in nicely, but I'll persevere with that. Get it back into place, he says. Okay, brilliant, fantastic. No issues with that actually, just went back in straight easy. So it was just a case of getting that corner folded in and it went in nicely. Just obviously make sure it's nicely behind the rubber seal there as well. Okay, brilliant, so there we go. Back down on the ground. Everything's tightened up, all torqued up. So now we can just take it for a quick test drive. Quick test drive around the block and everything's good. Everything feels well. So a good job done. Okay, perfect. So there we go, one new shock absorber. So if you enjoyed the video, remember to hit like down below. Remember to subscribe as well. Thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.